We had a very cool day last year, and it's normal. The setup is a little bit off maybe in the rear end.
Will you change the tire pressures?
You bet we will.
Okay, we'll go back to Paul.
Still under a full course yellow. The leader under yellow is Paul Tracy, winning his first IndyCar race at Long Beach. He also dominated at Phoenix and Milwaukee, only to fall short as a victim of circumstance. We ask him if he begins now to question his ability after such moments.
It gets tough sometimes. Well, I'm sure the way I look at it, over the last week, I've looked at it, I could have been leading the championship now with 3 wins. But it didn't happen, so we gotta move on to the next race. And I've had some talks with some people and with Roger, and they said, hey, you just got to keep moving on and not worry about the past. And when you take a look at a guy like Michael, the last 2 years, he didn't make any points until Portland. Last year, he didn't have any points until Portland, so you just got to focus and get things turned around.
And the green comes out once again here on Belle Isle after a full course caution. There was some slower traffic ahead of the leader, Paul Tracy, most notably Marco Greco, but he wisely got out of the way. Now he's being chased by Nigel Mansell, Stefan Johansson, Bobby Rahal, and Al Unser Jr. as the race is back on. 25 laps are complete.
Now, Paul, even though all the cars came in the pits at one time, so we didn't get a chance to see all the adjustments that were made, but some of these guys, there's Johansson going by Greco. Some of these guys made some adjustments to their cars. So now we got to watch, like, for example, with Mansell. Did he make an adjustment, or will he make a gain?
The front 3 cars, now the front 4 back in contact as Rahal gets clear as well. And Al Unser Jr. will struggle to get around slower traffic, and then he will be back in the fight too. Buddy Lazier sits just ahead of Little Al. All of the field has been in for a pit stop as we've got a car solidly into the barrier now, and that is Olivier Briard, the French driver, in his second IndyCar race. And he got a good piece of the tire barrier, but the car looks none the worse from wear. That's the big advantage to these kind of barriers.
Those tires are saving more money than anything else in IndyCar racing is ever saving. They just catch the car like a balloon and stop it. There might be minor damage, but at least it's not a new car.
One asset of these many yellows is that Roger Penske is doubtless able to talk to Paul Tracy a lot more than he might ordinarily be able to, and keep him calm, keep talking him through this race.
Scott Brayton into the pits, stop and go penalty. You saw it's a violation of the pit speed limit here. You saw the corner workers and the course marshals here, who, by the way, are all volunteers. They come out and spend days of their time just to make sure that these kind of races can keep going. And they were pulling Briard out of the way as fast as they can, thinking, well, if one car got there, another one can. Yellow in this section of the race course. Let's go to Jack Arute.
Sam Posey, your supposition is absolutely correct. Roger Penske has utilized this downtime to try and talk his young driver through. As he has said so many other times, he said, remember, stay calm, be smooth. The most important thing he kept saying is, remember what Rick has tried to teach you.
Rick obviously having tremendous impact on this team now that he's the coach rather than the driver. Witness Emerson Fittipaldi's great drive at Indianapolis, but very much patterned after the way Rick used to drive at Indianapolis.
Goes Scott Brayton, penalized for violating the 80-mile-an-hour speed limit rule in the pits. Let's take a look at the incident that put Briard into the wall. That's BOESEL alongside, and he just got high on the entry to the corner, pushed out, and straight into the barrier.
And it's slippery. When he got out of what we call the groove being the black spot that you see where the cars run, he got on the outside of that, and that's where we call the marbles lie. And the car really got loose when he hit the marbles.
But you know, it's a warm day here, a lot of sunshine. Same situation, see the back end come around there?
Cut one barrier and that hooked the car and come right into the front end, but it sure slowed it down easy. He just got too high in the track, that's all.
Well, we've seen a lot of the cars coming loose, the back end of the car coming out on a number of these corners, so maybe, especially when cutting a bit slippery too.
Well, Paul, it isn't getting too slippery right now. He just was too wide going in there, but obviously at this particular time of the race, it's going to get slippery because all the cars drop a little bit of fluid, and they always do it in the groove. That's the worst place in the world to be dropping it, though.
Race summary after 26 laps. The leader, Paul Tracy, no challenge at the front at the moment. Averaging 87 miles an hour. These are the cars out. Buell, Smith, Pruett in his contact. barrier. Smith climbed out, and of course, Grouillard.
There's a way that TRACY moves the car around a track when he's really hustling it. We're not looking at that right now. He's driving a smooth race, keeping Mansell at bay. This is a little different, Paul Tracy, than we're used to. And Mansell, you can see, is the man who's hustling, getting it a little deep in that turn and locking up one of his front wheels.
Now, immediately, Sam, he'll reach over and make an adjustment to those brakes. These drivers can adjust their brake balance between the front and the rear by just turning a knob inside the car. He had a little bit too much on the front, and this guy, Mansell, drives him deep into the turn. So he'll just make a little adjustment.
Well, there's a view of Nigel Mansell's tires, Bobby.
Those are all blisters, you know, just too much heat for the rubber. We said that the rubber was softer this year. Well, sometimes the drivers never run them as hard as they can until race day, so the blisters don't show up in practice and qualifying.
Is that the result we're seeing here, or is that just his driving style coming hard into that corner?
No, it really nothing to do with the braking. It just happens to be that the tires are just a little bit too soft for the heat and the speed they're running today.
So TRACY continues his lead, upping the ante now to about 101 miles an hour on each lap that he turns. But Mansell is turning a lap at about the same pace, trying to catch Paul Tracy with 28 laps of 77 now complete on Belle Isle.
This track fact is brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealers. Have you driven a Ford lately?
As IndyCar, they wanted an accurate system to keep track of the cars on the racetrack. They now have a totally automated timing and scoring system, the heart of which is in fact this transmitter that has a number that's then assigned to the number of the car, and then it is placed here in the side pod. So in fact, as the car passes across the track, there are antennas buried into the racetrack, 7 of which around the track to give you all types of information. Now, the information that it gives you is lap time, position on the track, speed on the actual straightaway, as well as time spent in the pits. They have now made available this year for the first time an actual floppy disk after the race with all the information not only of your own car, but in fact for every competitor. So on the way home, since most of the teams do have now these notebook computers, they could crunch all those numbers and see how their performance was relative on the track versus the pits, which would certainly help them in the future for strategy. Now also in the future, we may see in fact these transmitters make their way from the race car to the road. In fact, there's now a study going underway that instead of having to pay tolls when you drive through, that road cars might have a transponder similar to this, so you would never have to stop and pay a toll.
Back at the ITT Automotive Detroit Grand Prix, boy, look at this group of cars. This is a battle that revolves around about 12th place. Teo Fabi and then Jimmy Vasser, then Emerson Fittipaldi. You see him coming through there, and right behind him, that's Mike Groff in the Rahal Hogan car. And he has been doing everything he can to get around Fittipaldi. There's Fittipaldi just ahead. Last few laps, Groff has really been all over the top of Fittipaldi's car.
Well, Bobby talked about how tough it is to pass here, and this is a driver's nightmare. Fittipaldi penalized, of course, dropped back, and now he has such a hard time working his way up. It can be laps before you can put a pass on a car that is nearly equal.
Yeah, and when a guy slows down in front, Sam, he slows the whole chain down. The guys back in the back start doing sometimes crazy passes, and of course that's what most of them are worried about, because it does slow it. It's like an accordion working back and forth.
We're riding with the only Indy car that is made in the United States, as we see Stefan Johansson
starting to work on Nigel Mansell.
Bet.
Battle for second place. Here they come as Mansell.
You can see the groove Nigel was in right there, Paul. He's not handling quite as good as he was. He was a little tight coming off that turn instead of letting the car have his head, so to speak.
Same time Rahal closes in on Johansson. Let's go to Gary Gerald.
A radio report, Paul, from Nigel Mansell. They are going to concern their efforts now on trying to save tires. They saw the blisters on the set that came off on the yellow flag pit stop. Also reported blisters, Al Unser Jr., Eddie Cheever, Dan Sullivan, and we also mentioned Mario Andretti. So there's concern on tires for a lot of these crews. Mansell's trying to conserve. Let's go to Jack.
Well, Gary, there is no concern on your leader's pit concerning tires. Now, all these Goodyear tires start with 30 seconds of tread on them. When they took the last set off, they measured it. That was the qualifying set. And for Paul Tracy, he had 30 seconds remaining. They have no tire problems. Maybe that's why they're leading.
Let's see, though, if that instruction translates to Nigel Mansell. It sure doesn't look like it as he locks that left front again coming into the corner. If they've told him to be careful on the tires, maybe he's trying, and maybe it just isn't showing.
Well, Nigel always drives deep in the turn. Johansson's really working on him hard. He always drives deep in the turn, but if you'll notice right now, he's going through the turns slower. And that's why you try to take care of the tires. And incidentally, all the air pressure changes in the world won't stop the blistering that they're having today.
Johansson all over Mansell in a battle for second.
It's the first time this year that we've seen Mansell in a defensive position. Briefly in Long Beach when Little Al was attacking him, and that ended in Little Al in the wall. It'll be very interesting to see what happens here. Little Al disparaged Nigel Mansell at that point, saying he blocked him, and finally when he started by him, he put him in the wall. And I think we may see a very tense situation develop here.
What we have here, too, that is fascinating is the factor of tactics figuring into this, because Mansell, if he obeys the order from the pits and slows it down, and it does appear that he is trying to conserve tires as best he can, well, then he may fall back a bit only to conserve for a charge late in the race.
Well, remember, he has a gigantic lead in the championship, almost one full race worth over Raul BOESEL, who at this point is well back in the field. So championship-wise, Mansell merely needs to keep it out of trouble. That's his main goal now.
And as far as taking care of the tires, naturally the guy is smart. Any of these race drivers that are here today know how to take care of their tires as best they can. But like Paul said, just slow down too much, you're going to lose it anyway. Now, the difference why some cars do it and don't do it is all in the handling. Often, it's a mere matter of how much air pressure, or excuse me, how much downforce they have in the wings.
Tony Bettenhausen, Stefan Johansson's car owner, driver himself, drove at Indy.
He may be trying to get a black flag thrown at Mansell. I wouldn't be a bit surprised, because I'm sure Stefan is radioing in that he's being blocked. I wouldn't agree necessarily, but it's been a close call on a couple of occasions.
Sam, that's another one that shouldn't be happening, and I don't think it will. There's no precedent set for that, because he's not blocking him. He's just getting in the way a little bit, but he's certainly not blocking him. He's going as fast as he can. It's just this racetrack is very hard to pass on.
I just thought that the administration of the rules in any race ought to be loose enough to really allow them to race as much as they can, and to try merely to keep everything as equal as possible. We've seen this year some officiating that has brought that into question. Indianapolis here, even earlier in the season at Australia, there was a couple of questions being asked.
I think sometimes, Paul, when you see that there's obviously intentional
tire, left rear, that's Eddie Cheever.
Here's Adrian Fernandez.
We got a glimpse of Eddie Cheever, though, with a problem with his left rear as it started to come off the wheel.
Fernandez back in 18th.
There's Cheever as he gets it back under control and is going to try to get it back into the pits. They put a white flag out in the corner. Now that means that there's a slower moving vehicle just ahead, so if you come around the corner, you won't be surprised by it.
Cheever had been running in 15th.
Now, he's going to be lucky to make it in with that tire still on the rim. But the car can get down and run on the rim. Unfortunately, it's going to scrape some of the bottom of the car before it gets to the